Welcome back to what we'll call part 2 of this video on the geometric forms that come out of the celestial planes, the 31 planes of existence, teaching when it's married up with the numbers of the celestial year. So I've tidied this up from the end of the last video, which I just ran off like that. So down here, it's still not a very good 9-pointed star, but it's a 9-pointed star, the regular 9-pointed star with the 9 at the top, the expanded 9-pointed star with the 9 at the top, the 9-sided polygon with the 9 point at the top, and then we flip and we go back to the same sequences of numbers once again in the same order, except when they flip, doing the inner star model that I've just gone through, the 9 flips to the bottom here of the regular 9-pointed star, expanded 9-pointed star with the 9 at the bottom, and the polygon with the 9 at the bottom. Symbolically, the question is what's all that about? So my interpretation of that, when we meditate, in the beginning, if our object of meditation, for example, is the breath, then as a practitioner, I start to meditate on the breath. I breathe in, I breathe out, I start to feel. Ideally, I'm working with natural breath. That's probably the most exquisite form of pranayama to do, just natural breath as it comes in, as it comes out. But after a certain amount of time of observing that pattern, the mind blimps out and I get caught in distraction, thinking about other things and so on and so forth. And after a certain point of time, that may be quite short or it may be quite long, I realise that I'm no longer following the breath. I realise that I'm meditating, either way. And then at that point, if I'm able to practice well at that point, I come back and I start to observe the breath from the beginning again. And that'll last for a few breaths or for many breaths. And at a certain point, the mind will blimp out again. But at the beginning, the mind blimping out from the pattern of trying to concentrate the mind on the breath is very regular. And, if I was to plot that on a graph, I'd say, it'll be like this, it'll be up and down. It'll be like, oh, connection with the breath. Oh, blimping out. Oh, reconnected with the breath. Oh, blimping out again. It happens frequently when we start practicing, or when we're in a more distracted mood than normal for whatever reasons, because we've got stuff playing on our minds or on our emotions, or in any sense like that. Or maybe we're in a really noisy place, we're trying to meditate in the middle of a building site and we just keep getting distracted by noises. Whatever, it doesn't matter what it is, but generally speaking, the distraction is mental objects that draws us out of the center, the sense of presence that we have when we are being more focused. So I align that to the regular 9-pointed star. And of course, with the regular 9-pointed stars, I pointed out on the and all these geometric forms, is that we can keep retracing these infinitely. Okay, and this is already outside of the human plane. The human plane is down here in plane 5. This is already, we're trying to take conscious effort to be present in our moment-to-moment lives. But even then, we can go around this cycle as well, pretty much infinitely. But if we stay with it, at a certain point, consciousness expands a little bit. And when that expansion happens, we're more able to stay with the practice. If it's observation of breath, for example, then I'm more able to stay with the flow of breath for longer periods. And when I dip out, when the mind does blimp in and I blimp out, then the chances are I'll also notice that quicker and I'll come back to practice. So here we are on the more expanded version And we can go round and round and round on this diagram. But at a certain point, the idea of the human planes having infinite lifespans and the sixth plane upwards having limited lifespans is that technically, if we really can stick with this process, even if we're blimping out, if we can keep coming back, then at a certain point we do shift into another space. We move up a dimension, a plane, and in this plane it's easier to maintain the practice. And the same goes here. If we are able to keep going with that, blimping out and come back, blimping out and come back, at another point we move into a much more expansive state. We're now no longer into a star or into a polygon, and a polygon is much more an approximation of a circle, which is the celestial year of just going round and round in a cycle. And this is this sort of stage in meditation when the practice becomes almost effortless, in that we don't really have to concentrate on coming back to the breath, because we're almost just, the practice happens of itself almost. And if I do have distracted thoughts can come, and in this space I may just see the distracted thought and let it go, just like the classic analogy of the cloud passing in the clear blue sky. Or I may get a little bit hooked onto the thought to let it go very, very quickly afterwards. So almost unbroken turning around of concentration, presence, mindfulness, awareness. So what happens when we shift from the 8th to the 9th plane? So this again is the crucial element for me. If we're practicing in accordance to the teaching outlined within the book, once we get to this stage, this means that I'm globally aware of my body, I'm globally aware of my emotional system, and I'm globally aware of my mind. And through those, whatever those fluctuations are, I'm able to stay with presence and balance. When we arrive at this stage, what we're meant to do here is we're meant to put our attention towards the outer world, to the sense door realm. So I'm at the door of my senses. Senses in the Buddhist teachings also include the mind, so thought, objects of thoughts that come to us. So thoughts and then the 5 classic senses. Up until now, attention has been more focused inwardly, body, emotions, mind. And now the attention switches to the outer world. So in practice, the most easiest way to do that is just to tune in, listening to all that is around us. But also there's an energetic resonance, vibration of the space all around us as well, which is also possible to tune into. So when we make this shift from inner balance, Kung Fu Panda style, to opening up to the sense doors, we'll talk about the 9 shift in a moment. But the first thing to notice is that we move back into the regular 9-pointed style with these sharper angles. And so I'm sitting, I've arrived at that point of inner balance, centeredness, and then I decide to start to become more and more aware of the phenomenal world around me, the outer world. And after switching to that practice, after a short period of time, the attention will come back inward, because we're not used to having this centered presence and then switching our attention to the outside. It's a new technique, it's a new stage in the practice. When we realize that we're back here dealing with body, mind and emotions, at a certain point, sooner or later, we can go back to the practice now of sense door awareness. and we'll fluctuate between those two awarenesses, and that's why we're back in the regular pointed star with the more acute angles. And what happens in the practice is, as we become aware of the sensory door world, then this is where the third eye starts to be worked, starts to be felt more persistent there, and to the point where the meditator can feel quite a strong build-up of we can call it tension, but we could also just call it energy or presence at the third eye. From the third eye, we then, when this build-up is there, we then take our attention to the crown chakra. And from the crown chakra, that allows the energy to then start to move back down and round through Bindu chakra at the back of the head and down through the spine. So this is the point where energy needs to go from building up towards the third eye and crown to then starting to come back down. And that's why the form flips at this stage. And then after that point, it's kind of the same theory, that as long as we stay with this practice of flipping between inner awareness and outer awareness, then at a certain point we shift into another plane where that rapport becomes more stable, and I'm much more able to stay with a more expanded star, a more expanded awareness, because now I'm not just here, I am much more here, and occasionally I'm contracting again and coming back to the inner awareness. And then once again, if I do stay with that process going around the expanded star, at a certain point I will shift into another plane, which is the symbolized by the enogon, the nine-sided polygon. And they're in a much more expansive consciousness where I am stably aware of the internal experience and also the external experience of the world all about me. So again, this is part of the stuff in the book, but this point here, when we switch from the outer, from the tension in the third eye, it's a hiatus point, and often when we're meditating we'll keep our attention internal, but if we know to send the awareness to the crown at that point, this is a decision that the meditator needs to make, because it doesn't necessarily automatically go up there, although it can happen naturally. The shift of awareness doesn't happen necessarily, but if we can make that shift both to outer awareness and to raising the attention to the crown, then there's the potential for the energy to come down. But to move through that experience, we pass through what in yoga is known as the first knot. So this is the point 999 is the first knot, which is explained in the book, and maybe I'll get to do a video on it as well. I mean, whether that's 999, it's accumulation of the three nines. I've got different theories in the book as to why it's 999, the third knot, the first knot. So really, just to point out that this switch in planes, particularly from the 8th to the 9th plane, is not taken in a lot of meditation practices, because a lot of meditation practices break down when we arrive at the first knot, or go into a different direction because we don't know how to pass the first knot. And so that's really the key in the Powers of Nine teaching, is it's how to go through the first knot and how to bring energy down. And the whole principle of bringing energy down is to bring us into a more present, awakened space in the here and now, because we are looking for an awakened state and not deep states of absorption through this teaching. So I just wanted to go through and just explain a little bit that symbolism in terms of the meditative practice, and hopefully I'll build on this and put some more material out soon. So thanks for watching.